The sting on my cheek was still hot from her slap when the deadbolt slammed shut, sealing me out of the only home I had left. Dad had just stood there in the shadows, silent, standing on the icy pavement with barely a bag to my name. I realized I was homeless. I thought I had hit rock bottom until a black car pulled up to the curb and a stranger's voice called out from the dark interior. "My name is Claire Mitchell, and up until 20 minutes ago, I was a 29-year-old woman with a respectable career, a 5-year plan, and a belief that family meant having a safety net. Now, I was just a shivering body on the concrete, staring at a closed door that used to be my home." The sound of the lock sliding into place was louder than the shout that had preceded it. Click, thud. It was a definitive, mechanical finality that severed my life into two distinct eras, before tonight and whatever the hell came after. The porch light flickered once and then died, plunging the front yard into the aggressive darkness of a Seattle winter. I stood there, frozen not just by the 30-degree wind cutting through my thin sweater, but by the sheer, paralyzing shock of violence. My left cheek pulsed with a hot, rhythmic throbbing where Rebecca's hand had connected with my skin. It was not a slap of discipline, it was a slap of hatred, delivered with the full weight of a woman who had been waiting years for an excuse. I looked down at the duffel bag she had hurled after me. It sat crookedly on the bottom step, the zipper half open, spilling out the sleeve of my gray hoodie like a tongue lolling out of a dead mouth. That bag contained everything she had allowed me to grab in the 3 minutes of chaos that had erupted in the kitchen. My laptop, a few pairs of jeans, my toothbrush, the rest of my life, my books, my winter coat, the jewelry my mother had left me, was still inside, held hostage behind that beige door. "Dad," I whispered. The word dissolved instantly in the cold air. I knew he was there. I had seen him just before the darkness took over. He had been standing in the hallway, a silhouette against the warm yellow light of the kitchen. He had watched Rebecca grab my arm. He had watched her shove me. He had watched her strike me across the face with enough force to make my teeth rattle, and he had done absolutely nothing. He had stood there like a piece of antique furniture, decorative and silent, while his wife threw his daughter into the street. The curtains in the living room window twitched. I saw a shadow move, and then the blinds were lowered completely. He was not coming. I picked up the duffel bag, my fingers stiff and clumsy. I walked down the driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel that I had raked just 2 weeks ago because Rebecca said the gardener was too expensive. I reached the sidewalk and turned back to look at the house. It was a beautiful 2-story Craftsman in Queen Anne, the kind of house that projected stability and warmth. It was the house I grew up in, the house where my mother had taught me to read in the bay window. Now, it looked like a fortress designed to keep enemies out, and apparently, I was the enemy. I shivered violently. I needed to think. I was the content lead at Northbridge Creative Studio. My job was literally to solve problems, to create narratives, to find the logic in chaos. I managed a team of 12 people. I handled budgets of over $50,000 a quarter. I was capable. I was an adult. I was Claire Mitchell. But as I stood under the flickering street lamp, I felt like a frightened child. I reached into my jeans pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was the only source of light for blocks. My battery was at 12%. Perfect. I unlocked it, my thumb trembling, and tapped on my banking app. I needed to know exactly how bad this was. When the numbers loaded, I felt the bile rise in my throat. Available balance, $42.16. I stared at the screen, blinking, hoping the pixels would rearrange themselves into something that made sense, but they remained stubbornly, horrifyingly low. Just yesterday, that balance had been nearly $3,000. I scrolled down to the transaction history. Transfer to Joint Household Act, $2,500. I remembered the conversation perfectly. It was Tuesday morning. Rebecca had been crying at the breakfast table, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, talking about the mortgage rates adjusting, about how the bank was threatening foreclosure if they did not make a lump sum payment by Friday. She had held my hand. Her palms were sweaty. She had said, "Claire, honey, we are a team. We are doing this so we can all have a future here. It is just a loan until your father's bonus comes in next month. I had transferred the money. I had emptied my personal checking account to save our home. Our home. The joke was so cruel I almost laughed out loud. But it would have sounded like a sob. There was no our. There was only their home, and my money, which was now their money. I checked my savings account next. This was the big one. The Future Home Fund. When I agreed to move back in 6 months ago, the deal was simple. I would pay rent. Yes, but a large portion of my paycheck would go into a high-yield joint savings account that Dad managed. It was supposed to force me to save for a down payment in this impossible housing market. I had been depositing $1,500 a month religiously. I tapped the tab for the savings account. Account status closed. My breath hitched. I tapped it again, stabbing the glass with my cold thumb. Account closed. 0 balance. The money was gone, all of it. 6 months of savings, nearly $9,000, vanished. A notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen, obscuring the zeros. It was a text message from Dad's house. Rebecca, do not even think about banging on the door. The neighbors are already watching. If you cause a scene, I will call the police and tell them you are on drugs and violent. I have marks on my arm where you grabbed me. I stared at the message. I had never touched her. She had grabbed me to throw me out. And now she was going to use the bruises she probably gave herself to frame me? Another text came through immediately. Dad, Claire, please just go. You are upsetting Rebecca. She is very fragile right now. We can talk in a few weeks when you have cooled down and are ready to apologize. Apologize? The word hit me harder than the slap. Apologize for what? For discovering that my rent money was going to her credit card debt? For asking why my name wasn't on the deed like they promised? For existing? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Rebecca. Rebecca. Also, do not bother posting your little sob stories on Instagram. I have access to your old cloud account. Remember? I found some very interesting photos from your college spring break. Would be a shame if your boss at Northbridge saw them. Or your clients. Just go away. Claire, you are ungrateful trash. The malice was so precise, so calculated. She had this planned. She knew exactly where to hit me. My reputation, my career, my fear of public humiliation. She knew I was a private person. She knew I worked hard to build a professional image at the studio. I shoved the phone back into my pocket before my fingers froze completely. The wind picked up, whipping my hair across my face. It was starting to sleet, tiny needles of ice stinging my bare neck. I looked up and down the street. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood. The houses were set far back from the road, windows glowing with the warm blue light of televisions. Families were inside. People were eating dinner, arguing about remote controls, doing homework, normal lives. 10 minutes ago, I thought I had one of those lives. Where could I go? My apartment in Capitol Hill was gone. I had broken the lease to move here, paying a penalty of $2,000 to do it, because Dad said they needed me close. I had sold my furniture, my vintage velvet sofa, my oak dining table, on Marketplace for pennies on the dollar because Rebecca said the house was already fully furnished and there was no room for clutter. I ran through my mental Rolodex of friends. Sarah was in Portland for the week with her boyfriend. Jessica had a new baby, and her mother-in-law was staying in the guest room. She had been complaining about the lack of space for days. I could not show up on her doorstep at 9 o'clock at night with a duffel bag and a bruised face. It was too much to ask. A hotel? With $42? In Seattle? I could maybe afford a hostel, if I could get there, but the closest one was downtown, miles away. I did not have a car. I had sold my Toyota Camry 3 months ago because we have 3 cars in the driveway. Claire, it is wasteful to pay insurance on a 4th. Another suggestion from Rebecca. Another piece of my independence stripped away, layer by layer, disguised as financial prudence. I realized then that I was not just homeless. I was trapped. I had been systematically dismantled. My housing, my transportation, my savings, My emergency fund. It had all been pruned away until I was completely reliant on them, and then they had cut the cord. I walked over to the curb and sat down on the wet concrete. I did not care that the dampness seeped instantly through my jeans. I pulled my knees up to my chest and wrapped my arms around them, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. I was the content lead. I told stories for a living. I crafted brand identities. I knew how to spin a narrative, but sitting there in the gutter, I could not spin this. This was not a challenge to overcome. This was a catastrophe. I buried my face in my knees. I refused to cry. If I cried, my face would freeze, and I would give Rebecca the satisfaction of knowing she broke me. I just breathed, inhaling the smell of wet asphalt and dying leaves. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe out. The sound of an engine broke through the rhythm of my breathing. It was a low, smooth purr, not the rattling chug of the delivery trucks or the high whine of the neighbor's teenage son's modified Honda. This was the sound of expensive engineering. I did not look up at first. I assumed it was just a car passing by, heading to a warm garage somewhere else. But the sound did not pass. It grew louder, then softer, the tires hissing on the wet pavement as the vehicle slowed down. The headlights swept over me, blindingly bright, casting my elongated shadow against the hedge behind me. The car stopped. I squinted against the glare, raising a hand to shield my eyes. It was a black sedan, a Lincoln, maybe, or a high-end Mercedes. It was sleek, polished to a mirror shine despite the weather, looking like a dark shark swimming through the suburban gloom. It sat there idling at the curb, directly in front of me. The engine hummed with a quiet, predatory patience. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this the police? Had Rebecca actually called them? No, this was not a patrol car. Was it an Uber? I had not called one. I stayed seated, my muscles tensed, ready to run, though I had nowhere to run to. The rear passenger window glided down with a silent electronic whir. The interior of the car was dark, but the faint glow of the dashboard lights illuminated the silhouette of a person sitting in the back seat. Claire Elise Mitchell? The voice was female, crisp, and authoritative. It was not a question of identity. It was a confirmation. It sounded like the voice of a woman who was used to people listening when she spoke. I froze. No one used my middle name. Not my friends, not my colleagues, only my father and my mother before she died. Hearing it spoken by a stranger in the dark sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I slowly stood up, my legs stiff. I clutched the strap of my duffel bag like a weapon. "Who is asking?" My voice came out raspier than I intended. The woman leaned forward slightly, and the street lamp caught her features. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp, elegant bob. She wore a coat with a high collar, something structured and expensive. Her face was unsmiling, her eyes sharp and assessing as she looked me up and down. She took in the duffel bag, my shivering shoulders, the red mark blooming on my cheek. She did not look pitying. She looked vindicated. "My name is not important right now," she said. Her tone was calm, cutting through the wind. "What is important is that you are currently standing on a sidewalk with $40 in your bank account and nowhere to sleep." My stomach dropped. How could she possibly know that? "How do you—" I started, stepping back. "I know a great deal about what has been happening in that house," she interrupted, nodding her chin toward the dark windows of my father's home. "And I know that if you stay out here, you will freeze, or worse, you will go back and beg them to let you in. And that would be a mistake you would regret for the rest of your life." She unlatched the door from the inside. It clicked open an inch. "Get in the car. Claire, it is not safe for you out here." I stood rooted to the spot. Every instinct I had honed as a single woman living in a city screamed at me. Stranger danger. Do not get in the car. Run. But run where? To the park bench? To the bus stop? I looked at the house again. It was a tomb, a place where my trust had gone to die. Then I looked at the woman. There was something in her eyes. Not warmth, Exactly. But a fierce intelligence, a recognition. She did not look like a predator. She looked like a lifeboat. "You called me Claire Elise," I said, my voice trembling. "How do you know my middle name?" "I know more than your name," she said softly. "I know you did not deserve that slap, and I know exactly how much money they stole from you." That was it. The specific, impossible knowledge broke my resistance. If she wanted to hurt me, she could have done it already. She held power. That much was clear. And right now, power was the one thing I desperately lacked. I took a step toward the curb. The heat radiating from the open car window hit my face, smelling of leather and expensive perfume. It smelled like safety. It smelled like a trap. I reached out, my hand shaking uncontrollably, and grabbed the cold metal of the door handle. I paused for 1 second, suspended between the life I was losing and the unknown darkness of the back seat. I pulled the door open. The leather seat of the stranger's car was warm, a stark contrast to the freezing wind I had just escaped, but the chill inside my bones went deeper than the weather. As the black sedan pulled away from the curb, gliding silently over the asphalt, I did not look back at the house. I did not need to. I had the image of that closed door burned into my retinas, a final punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that had been running on for nearly 2 decades. The violence of tonight, the slap, the shoving, the screaming, was shocking in its physical immediacy, but in truth, it was just the crescendo of a quiet, slow-motion erasure that had begun 18 years ago. It started when my mother died. I was 10 years old. One day, the house was filled with the smell of her oil paints and the sound of her humming Fleetwood Mac songs in the kitchen. The next, it was filled with casserole dishes from neighbors, and a silence so heavy it felt like it would crush my ribs. My father, David, withered in that silence. He was a good man, or so I believed back then. But he was weak. He was a man who needed a sun to orbit, and without my mother, he was drifting into the dark. 2 years later, he found a new son. Rebecca entered our lives not as a villain, but as a savior. She was beautiful, in that polished, high-maintenance way that commands attention. She managed a high-end furniture store downtown, and she brought that same curatorial eye to our messy, grieving lives. She organized the pantry. She replaced the worn curtains. She made my father smile again. For a 12-year-old girl desperate to see her dad happy, that should have been enough. But from the very first week she moved in, I learned that there was a difference between being cared for and being managed. I remember coming home from school one Tuesday, bursting with news about a science fair project. Rebecca was in the living room, rearranging the throw pillows. I ran to give her a hug, a tentative, hopeful gesture of acceptance. She stiffened. She did not push me away. Not exactly. She just turned her body slightly, creating a rigid angle that my arms could not bridge, and patted my shoulder with a closed hand. "Claire, honey," she had said, her voice smooth as glass, "let us not wrinkle the blouse. I have a dinner meeting later." That was the tone, polite, correct, and completely impenetrable. She never raised her voice at me in those early years. She never locked me in cupboards or starved me. It was far more subtle than that. She simply treated me like a long-term guest who had overstayed her welcome. I was a tenant in my childhood home, tolerated and never truly integrated. Then came Lily. Rebecca had a daughter from a previous marriage, 3 years younger than me. When Lily moved in, the dynamic shifted from cold to competitive. Lily was bubbly, demanding, and adept at playing the part of the adorable daughter. Rebecca blossomed with her. I watched them from the hallway, seeing the physical affection I craved being lavished on Lily. They sat on the couch tangled together watching movies, sharing popcorn, whispering secrets. If I tried to join, the conversation would pause, polite smiles would be plastered on, and the air would grow thin until I excused myself. My father saw it. I know he did. But he was terrified. He was terrified of being alone again, terrified of rocking the boat. "She is just adjusting, Claire." He would tell me when I cried in my room, "Rebecca is not used to children your age. You are older. You are more mature. You need to be the adult in the situation. Be the adult. I was 13. That phrase became the mantra of my adolescence. Being the adult meant I had to understand why Lily got the new laptop for school while I had to use the family desktop in the den. Being the adult meant understanding that my bedroom needed to be moved to the smaller guest room because Lily needed more space for her dance practice. Being the adult meant taking the blame. There was an incident when I was 16. Rebecca had a collection of crystal vases she kept on the mantel. One afternoon, a vase shattered. I was upstairs doing homework. I heard the crash and ran down to find Lily standing over the shards, looking terrified. When Rebecca walked in a moment later, Lily burst into tears and pointed at the ceiling, claiming I had stomped on the floor so hard it shook the mantel. It was a ridiculous lie. Physics did not work that way, but Rebecca turned her gaze on me, cold and disappointed. "Claire, really? You are so clumsy, and now you are making your sister cry?" "I did not do anything," I had protested, looking at my dad. "I was sitting at my desk." Dad rubbed his temples. Looking between his weeping stepdaughter and his indignant biological daughter, he chose peace. He always chose peace. "Claire," he said wearily, "just apologize so we can move on. It is just a vase." "But I did not break it." "Claire, please." So I apologized. I swept up the glass. I paid for a replacement out of my babysitting money, and I learned that truth mattered less than the narrative Rebecca wanted to construct. As I grew older, the exclusion became systemic, particularly during the holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas were Rebecca's stage. She loved hosting, loved the performance of the perfect family, but the labor behind that performance fell squarely on me. From the age of 15, I was the sous chef, the maid, and the decorator. I would wake up at 6 in the morning to peel 5 pounds of potatoes, brine the turkey, and iron the tablecloths. Rebecca and Lily would sleep until 9, coming down in matching silk pajamas to open presents and drink mimosas. When the guests arrived, aunts, uncles, cousins, business associates, Rebecca would glide through the room, champagne flute in hand, accepting compliments on the meal she had barely touched. "Oh, you know how it is," she would laugh, her hand resting possessively on my father's arm. "I just wanted everything to be special for you all." Meanwhile, I would be in the kitchen, sweating over the gravy, scrubbing pans so the sink would be clear. Then came the photo, that inevitable, orchestrated moment. "Family picture," Rebecca would chirp. They would gather by the tree, Rebecca, radiant, Lily, glowing, Dad, looking content, and me, usually wiping flour off my jeans, standing slightly to the edge. "Smile, Claire. You look so sour," Rebecca would say, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do not ruin the mood." I would force a smile, the flash would go off, and 10 minutes later, the photo would be on Facebook and Instagram with the caption, "So blessed, my beautiful family, grateful." The comments would pour in, "You are a saint. Rebecca, what a lucky man David is. Perfect life." No one saw the reality. No one saw that I was not a daughter. I was a prop. The most dangerous shift, however, was financial. It happened so slowly that even I, who was hypervigilant, missed the early warning signs. It started with Rebecca taking over the household bills because Dad was too stressed at work. Then it was managing the investments. I remember coming home from college for the summer after my sophomore year. I walked into the study to find Rebecca sitting at Dad's desk, surrounded by stacks of paper. She was guiding his hand to sign a document. "What is that?" I had asked from the doorway. Rebecca jumped, covering the paper with a folder. "Just refinancing. Claire, boring adult stuff. Do not worry your pretty little head about it." Dad looked up, his eyes unfocused, a glass of scotch half empty near his elbow. "Rebecca is handling it, sweetie. She is really good with the numbers, better than I ever was." I felt a chill then, a premonition. "Dad, are you reading what you are signing?" "Claire, stop it!" Rebecca snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "Do not be disrespectful. I am saving this family money, something you would not understand since you have never had to run a household. That was the narrative she spun to the world, that I was a financial drain. The reality was the opposite. When I got into the University of Washington, Rebecca sat us down and said the family finances were tight. She said they could not afford my tuition without compromising their retirement or Lily's future private school fund. So I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop while taking a full course load. I applied for every grant and scholarship I could find. I took out student loans in my own name. I graduated with honors and $15,000 in debt, but I did it on my own. I was proud of that. But Rebecca stole that too. At my graduation party, a small barbecue in the backyard that I had paid for myself, I overheard Rebecca talking to my Aunt Sarah. It was a struggle, Rebecca was saying, her voice lowered to a confidential whisper. Writing those tuition checks every semester, well, we had to cut back on a lot, no vacations for 4 years. But we wanted Claire to have the best start. We just hope she appreciates the sacrifice. Aunt Sarah shook her head, looking at me across the yard with a mixture of pity and judgment. You are too good to her, Rebecca. Kids these days feel so entitled. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and pull out my loan documents, my pay stubs, my bank statements. I wanted to shout that they hadn't paid a dime, but I saw my father standing next to them, nodding along, a weak smile on his face. He knew the truth. He knew I had worked double shifts during finals week to pay for my books, but he let her lie. He let her rewrite history because it made him look like a generous provider and her look like a martyr. If I caused a scene, I would just prove their point. I would be the emotional, ungrateful daughter they had painted me to be. So I swallowed the rage. It tasted like ash. After graduation, I moved to Seattle immediately. I got a job at Northbridge Creative Studio and threw myself into my career. I thought distance would heal the wound. I thought if I became successful, independent, and removed, the dynamic would change. I only went back for the obligatory holidays. I told myself I did it for Dad. I told myself that somewhere inside that house, the ghost of my mother was still watching, and she would want me to check on him. But every visit was a transaction. I was the free labor. I was the audience for their success. I drove Lily to her dance recitals when she was in town. I helped Rebecca set up her new iPad. I listened to Dad complain about his golf swing. But nobody asked me about my job. Nobody asked about my life. I would sit at the dinner table, listening to Lily brag about her sorority parties or her new car, a car Dad bought her, and I would feel invisible. I was a ghost in the machine of their happiness. I thought about cutting them off 1,000 times. My therapist in Seattle told me I should. Why do you go back to a dry well expecting water? She had asked me. It was a good question. The answer was pathetic. I went back because I was still waiting for my father to wake up. I was waiting for the moment when he would look at Rebecca and see the cruelty beneath the charm. I was waiting for him to look at me and say, I am sorry. Claire, I see you. That hope was the trap. It was that hope that made me say yes when they called me 6 months ago. The housing market in Seattle was brutal, and my rent had just hiked up by 30%. Dad had called, sounding more lucid and affectionate than he had in years. Come home for a year, Claire, he had said. We miss you. The house is too big for just the two of us now that Lily is away at college. You can save money. We can be a family again. Rebecca had taken the phone then. It makes financial sense. Claire, we want to help you buy your own place. Let us help you build a future. It sounded so rational. It sounded like an olive branch. I wanted to believe that age had softened Rebecca, that missing Lily had made her value me more. I wanted to believe that my father was finally stepping up. So I broke my lease. I packed my life into boxes. I walked back into the lion's den, thinking I was walking into a sanctuary. I did not know then that I was not walking into a home. I was walking into a bank vault where I was the asset to be liquidated. I did not know that the invitation was not born of love, but of necessity, their necessity. Sitting in the back of the stranger's car, watching the rain streak against the tinted glass. I realized with a clarity that hurt physically. I had never been a daughter to them, not since I was 10. I was an obstacle to be managed, a servant to be utilized, and finally, a resource to be harvested. And tonight, when the resource ran dry, they had simply taken out the trash. "We are almost there," the woman in the front seat said, her voice pulling me from the spiral of my memory. I looked at the back of her head, at the expensive cut of her silver hair. I did not know where "there" was. I did not know who she was. But as the car turned a corner, leaving the neighborhood of my childhood behind, I knew one thing for certain. The Claire who had begged for scraps of affection was gone. She was still standing on that porch, freezing in the dark. The woman sitting in this car was someone else entirely, and she was done apologizing. It all started with a spreadsheet. That was the irony of it. I did not move back into my father's house because of a breakdown or a lack of ambition. I moved back because of a calculated, logical financial decision that I had mapped out in Excel, cell by cell, dollar by dollar. Living in Seattle was becoming mathematically impossible. Even with my salary as a content lead at Northbridge, which was nearly $90,000 a year, the math was suffocating. My rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill had jumped to $2,800 a month. Between student loan payments, utilities, groceries, and the exorbitant cost of simply existing in a tech hub city, my ability to save for a down payment was non-existent. I was running on a treadmill, sweating and sprinting, but staying in the exact same place. That was when David and Rebecca pitched me the plan. It was a Sunday dinner in April, roast chicken, glazed carrots, a bottle of Merlot that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The atmosphere was warm, almost seductive in its domesticity. "We hate seeing you throw money away on rent, Claire," Rebecca had said, pouring me a second glass of wine. Her voice was laced with maternal concern, a tone she rarely used with me. "Your father and I have been talking. We have this big house. The guest suite has its own bathroom. Why not come home for a year? We can help you get ahead." Dad had nodded enthusiastically, looking more animated than I had seen him in months. "It makes sense, honey. You pay us a nominal amount for utilities, say $300, but the rest of what you would have spent on rent, let us say $1,500 a month, you put into a joint savings account with us. We will invest it, high yield. By the end of the year, you will have nearly $20,000 plus interest. That is your down payment. We will even match a percentage of it as a graduation gift from the program." They called it the program. It sounded official. It sounded like a partnership. Rebecca had even pulled out her iPad to show me a projection she had mocked up. The graph went up and to the right. It showed Claire's equity growing steadily. It showed a future where I wasn't just surviving, but thriving. "We are a family," Rebecca said, squeezing my hand across the table. Her palm was dry and cool. "Families help each other build wealth. We want to do this for you." I looked at the numbers. I looked at my dad's hopeful face. I looked at the spreadsheet that promised me a way out of the rental trap, and I said yes. I was such a fool. The transition from independent woman to live-in servant happened so fast I almost got whiplash. The very first weekend I moved in, the dynamic shifted. The warm, welcoming hostess vanished, replaced by a strict, micromanaging landlady. "Since you are saving so much money living here," Rebecca announced the Monday morning after I unpacked, "it is only fair that you contribute to the household labor. We do not run a hotel, Claire." The contribution was not light. I was assigned to cook dinner 5 nights a week. I was responsible for the deep cleaning of the kitchen and the downstairs bathroom every Saturday. I was the one who had to take the trash bins out to the curb on Tuesdays and bring them back in. "It builds character," Dad said when I gently pushed back on the volume of chores. He was reading the newspaper, avoiding my eyes. "Rebecca does so much. You should help her out." So, I did. I worked a 10-hour day at the studio, managing client crises and editorial calendars, and then I drove an hour in traffic to come home and start chopping onions. I scrubbed toilets. I vacuumed the rugs. I swallowed my pride because I kept visualizing that bank account growing. Every scrub of the toilet bowl was another $50 toward my future condo. But the financial arrangement was where the real trap lay. Per Rebecca's instructions, I did not just transfer money into a savings account I controlled. She insisted it be a family trust account, a joint account at their bank where she claimed they got a preferred interest rate because of their long-standing relationship with the branch manager. If you open a new account, you will get 0.5%, she lectured me, tapping her manicured nails on the granite counter. Our account gets 4%. Do not be stupid. Claire, maximize your return. So, on the first of every month, I transferred $1,500 directly to an account number she provided. It was labeled Claire Future Fund in my transfer history. For the first 3 months, I felt virtuous. I was sacrificing my freedom. Yes, but I was building a nest egg. I sold my velvet sofa. I sold my dining table. I sold my beloved mid-century lamps. I converted my physical assets into cash and dumped that cash into the future fund as well. I was all in. But the cracks started to show around month 4. I asked to see a statement, just a routine check-in. "Oh, the app is down right now," Rebecca said, waving her hand dismissively as she watched television. "I will print one out for you later." Later never came. A week later, I asked Dad, "Hey, can we log in and see how the interest is compounding? I want to see if we are on track for that condo in Ballard." Dad stiffened. He looked toward the kitchen where Rebecca was making tea. "Rebecca handles all the logins. Claire, you know I am terrible with passwords. Why are you so worried? Do you not trust us?" That was the weapon they used. Trust. Any inquiry into the mechanics of the deal was framed as an emotional betrayal. If I asked about the money, I was accusing them of theft. If I asked about the timeline, I was being ungrateful for their hospitality. Meanwhile, the psychological pressure ramped up. Rebecca began to weaponize my presence in the house. "It is funny," she said one evening while I was washing the dishes from a dinner she had eaten but not helped prepare. "My friend Susan's daughter is your age. She just bought a lovely house in Bellevue. Her husband is a surgeon. They are expecting their second child." She let the silence hang there, heavy and suffocating. "I am focusing on my career right now. Rebecca," I said, scrubbing a pot harder than necessary. "Of course you are," she sniffed. "And thank goodness your father and I are here to catch you. Most women at 29 have their own lives. But it is fine. We are happy to provide a roof for you while you figure things out." The narrative had shifted. I was no longer the prudent daughter making a smart financial move. I was the failure who had crawled back home because I could not hack it in the real world. She told this version of the story to everyone. I heard her on the phone with her friends, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Yes, Claire is back. It is a lot. Honestly, at her age, well, we just want to support her. She was struggling in the city. We could not just let her sink." I wanted to scream. I was earning nearly 6 figures. I was paying them $1,500 a month plus free labor. I was not sinking. I was being anchored. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday. I had stayed up late working on a pitch deck for a new tech client. I went downstairs around midnight to get a glass of water. The house was dark, but I saw a sliver of light coming from the sunroom at the back of the house. I heard Rebecca's voice. She was on the phone, and she sounded different. Not the polished, saccharine tone she used with me, and not the dismissive tone she used with Dad. She sounded sharp, businesslike, and slightly drunk. I stopped in the hallway, standing in the shadows by the refrigerator. I knew I should walk away. I knew eavesdropping rarely led to anything good, but something in her tone, a mix of gloating and anxiety, froze my feet to the floor. "No, Karen, do not worry about the liquidity," Rebecca was saying. "We made the lump sum payment on the modification last week. The bank is off our backs for at least 6 months." I frowned in the dark. Modification? What modification? Dad had paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. He had thrown a party to celebrate burning the note. "Yeah, well, David was panicking," Rebecca continued, followed by the sound of liquid pouring into a glass. He thought we were going to lose the house. I told him I would handle it, and I did. She laughed, a harsh, dry sound. We found a new revenue stream. The stepdaughter, God, she is so naive. She thinks she is putting money into a high-yield savings account for a condo. My heart stopped. The blood drained from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. $1,500 a month, Rebecca said, her voice dripping with contempt. Plus whatever extra I can guilt her into contributing for groceries. It covers the interest on the HELOC and a bit of the principal. It is perfect. By the time she figures it out, we will have refinanced again. HELOC, home equity line of credit. The pieces slammed together in my mind like a car crash. The tight finances, the refusal to show me bank statements, the sudden need for me to move home. They hadn't just invited me back to save money. They had invited me back because they were broke. Rebecca must have taken out a massive line of credit against the house, Dad's house, the house my mother had picked out, and they were drowning in the payments. Does David know? The voice on the other end must have asked, because Rebecca snorted. David knows we have bills to pay. He prefers not to know the details. As long as his golf club membership is paid and the lights stay on, he signs whatever I put in front of him. I told him it was a bridge loan. He does not even read the documents anymore. I could sign his name better than he does at this point. Actually, I think I did sign the last one. My breath hitched in my throat. Forgery. Not just theft. Not just lying. Financial fraud. I backed away slowly, terrified that the floorboards would creak. I retreated to my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Everything I thought I was building was a lie. The $20,000 I thought I had saved, it was gone. It had been eaten by the bank to pay for Rebecca's debts she had likely racked up maintaining the illusion of a wealthy lifestyle. I pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet, the one Rebecca had made for me. I looked at the column labeled Projected Growth. It was fiction. It was a fairy tale written in Arial font. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. It wasn't just the money. Money could be earned again. It was the betrayal. My father was either a co-conspirator or a willing victim, too cowardly to protect his own daughter from being cannibalized by his wife. I realized then that I was not a family member to them. I was a cash cow, and they were going to milk me until I was dry, and then they would discard me. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle, feeling the walls closing in. I knew I had to get out, but I also knew I could not just leave. If I walked away now, I would leave with nothing, no savings, no apartment, no furniture. I needed proof. The next morning, I started plotting. I needed to see the actual bank statements, not the ones Rebecca might print out, but the real ones. I needed to know whose name was on that account. I needed to know how deep the hole was. I stopped transferring extra money for groceries. I started eating lunch at work to save cash, and I waited for a slip-up. It took 3 days. Rebecca went to get her hair done, a 3-hour process involving highlights and gossip. She left her laptop on the kitchen island. Usually, it was password protected, but she had been complaining about how hard it was to remember all her codes. I walked into the kitchen. The house was silent. The screen was dark. I tapped the spacebar. The screen lit up. It asked for a PIN. I tried her birthday. Incorrect. I tried Lily's birthday. Incorrect. I tried the year she married my dad. Click. The home screen opened. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the trackpad. I navigated to the browser. Her email was open. I searched for Bank of America. There it was, the monthly statement notification. I clicked on the PDF attachment. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning for my name. I was looking for Claire Mitchell, or David and Claire Joint Trust. I found the deposit. Transfer from Claire Mitchell, $1,500. But the account holder's name at the top of the page was not mine. It wasn't even Dad's. Account holder, Rebecca J. Sterling. It was a personal checking account, her personal checking account. I scrolled further. The money I sent didn't sit there to earn interest. It went out almost immediately. Payment to Nordstrom, payment to Lexus Financial, cash withdrawal. My money, my furniture money, my freedom money. It was paying for her shoes and her car lease. I took out my phone and snapped photos of the screen, one after another, the deposits, the withdrawals, the account name. I was shaking with a cold, hard rage. I had the evidence. Now I just had to figure out how to use it without getting destroyed in the process. I didn't know then that I wouldn't get the chance to plan my exit. I didn't know that in 48 hours, I would be bleeding on the sidewalk. I closed the laptop, wiped my fingerprints off the keys with the sleeve of my sweater, and walked out of the kitchen. The trap had been sprung, but now, the prey was awake. The printed bank statement felt heavy in my pocket, like a stone I was carrying to my own execution. I had spent the entire day at work vibrating with a mixture of nausea and adrenaline, rehearsing exactly what I was going to say. I had run through every possible scenario in my head, from them apologizing and promising to pay me back, to them denying it entirely, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of how quickly a family can disintegrate when money is the weapon of choice. I walked into the house at 6:30 in the evening. The kitchen smelled of garlic and rosemary. It was a domestic scent that usually signaled comfort, but tonight it made my stomach turn. Dad was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a glass of red wine, scrolling through his phone. Rebecca was not in the room. This was my chance. I walked over to the island and pulled the folded piece of paper from my pocket. I smoothed it out on the granite countertop, right over the spot where he had placed his wine coaster. "Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk about the savings account." He looked up, his eyes glassy. He had been drinking more lately. I realized, another sign I had ignored. "Not now. Claire, I had a long day at the golf course. The membership fees are going up again. Can you believe it?" "Look at the paper, Dad." He glanced down at the document. It was the printout I had stolen from Rebecca's laptop, highlighting the transfers from my account into hers. "I do not understand," he said, feigning ignorance, though a flicker of fear crossed his face. "What is this?" "That is a record of the $9,000 I have sent you over the last 6 months, I said, leaning in. "Rebecca told me it was going into a high-yield trust for my down payment, but this says it is going into her personal checking account, and from there, it is going to Nordstrom, Lexus Financial, and payments on a credit line I did not know existed." Dad picked up his wine glass and took a long swallow. He did not look at me. "Rebecca manages the finances. Claire, you know that. She moves money around to maximize efficiency." "Efficiency?" I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that scraped my throat. "Dad, my name is not on this account. There is no trust. There is no down payment fund. You are using my rent money to pay your debts." He slammed the glass down, wine sloshing over the rim. "It is not just my debt, Claire. It is this house. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain this place? The property taxes alone are $12,000 a year. We were underwater. We needed cash flow." "So you lied to me?" I asked, feeling the tears prick my eyes. "You told me to move home to save for my future, but you just needed a tenant who would pay above market rates." "We are saving the house," he shouted, his face flushing red. "This is your inheritance. Claire, if the bank takes it, nobody gets anything. We are doing this for you in the long run." "For me?" I pointed at the statement. "Dad, look at the withdrawals. A spa day at the Four Seasons for $400? A dinner at Canlis for $300? Is that saving the house? Or is that Rebecca maintaining a lifestyle you cannot afford?" "Do not speak about her like that." "Speak about who like that?" The voice came from the doorway. Rebecca was standing there, wearing a silk robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked impeccable and terrifying. Her eyes darted from my face to the paper on the counter, and in an instant, her expression shifted from curiosity to cold, reptilian fury. She walked into the room, not hurriedly, but with the stalk of a predator. She snatched the paper from the counter before I could grab it. "You have been snooping," she hissed. I knew it. I told you, David. I told you she was sneaky, violating my privacy, hacking into my computer. That is a felony. Claire. Stealing my money is a crime. Rebecca, I shot back, my hands balling into fists at my sides. I want my money back. All of it. The $9,000. Rebecca laughed. It was a high, incredulous sound. Your money? You think that is your money? You have been living here for 6 months, eating our food, using our electricity, cluttering up our space. That money was rent, darling. And frankly, it was a discount. We had an agreement, I yelled, losing my composure. You said it was for a down payment. You showed me a spreadsheet. Plans change, she said, crumpling the paper and tossing it into the trash compactor. We needed the money, and since you are family, we assumed you would want to help, unless, of course, you are just a selfish, ungrateful little brat who only cares about herself. I am selfish? I stared at her, incredulous. I sold my furniture for you. I emptied my checking account last week because you said the bank was going to foreclose. And we appreciate that, Dad interjected weakly, trying to de-escalate. Claire, honey, listen, we can work this out. Once my bonus comes in next quarter. Oh, shut up, David, Rebecca snapped at him. There is no bonus. Stop lying to her. She is not a child. She turned back to me, her eyes gleaming with malice. We used the money to book the Christmas vacation, the Ritz-Carlton in Cabo, 3 suites, one for us, one for Lily and her boyfriend. The air left the room. Cabo? I whispered. You are going to Cabo with my savings? We all need a break, Rebecca said, examining her fingernails. It has been a stressful year, and Lily has been working so hard at college. She deserves a treat. And me? I asked, my voice trembling. Am I invited to this vacation I paid for? Rebecca smirked. Well, someone has to stay here and watch the house. The dogs need to be fed. We thought since you are between social engagements, you would not mind. That was the moment something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the theft. It was the absolute, casual cruelty of it. They were going to leave me here, in the winter, to pet sit while they burned through my life savings on a beach in Mexico with my stepsister. I am done, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. I am moving out, tomorrow, and I expect a check for $9,000 on this counter by morning. If it is not here, I am going to the police. The room went deadly silent. The refrigerator hummed. And, I added, looking at my father, I am going to hire a forensic accountant to look at the mortgage documents, because I heard you on the phone, Rebecca. I heard you say you signed Dad's name. That is fraud. That is prison time. The color drained from Dad's face. Claire, you would not... Watch me, I said. Rebecca moved. It happened so fast I barely registered it. 1 second she was by the sink. The next she was in my personal space, her face inches from mine. I could smell the wine on her breath and the expensive moisturizer she used. You ungrateful little bitch, she screamed, spit flying onto my cheek. You threaten me in my own house? After everything I have done for you? I took you in when you were a pathetic, motherless charity case. Don't you dare talk about my mother, I said, pushing past her to get to the hallway. Your mother was a weak, pathetic woman who died because she gave up, Rebecca shrieked. And you are just like her. I spun around. At least she didn't have to steal from her own family to pretend she was rich. Rebecca lunged. She didn't just slap me. She shoved me with her full body weight. I stumbled backward, my hip catching the edge of the granite island with a sickening crack. Pain radiated down my leg, hot and sharp. Before I could regain my balance, she was on me again. Her hand connected with the side of my face. A sharp, stinging slap that knocked my head to the side. My ear started ringing instantly. Get out, she screamed. Her face contorted into a mask of pure rage. Get out of my house. You are not wanted here. You are a cancer. She grabbed the front of my sweater and shoved me toward the back door. I was taller than her, but the shock had drained my strength. I stumbled into the hallway, trying to catch my footing. Dad, I yelled, looking past her shoulder. David was standing in the kitchen doorway. He had not moved. He was holding his wine glass with both hands, his knuckles white. He looked at me. Then he looked at his wife, who was currently assaulting his daughter. "Dad, help me!" Rebecca shoved me again, harder this time. I hit the wall, knocking a framed picture of Lily to the floor. Glass shattered. "Look what you did," Rebecca screamed. "You are destroying this house. David, are you going to let her destroy our home?" David looked at me. His eyes were sad, pathetic, and utterly empty of courage. "Claire," he said, his voice barely a whisper, Maybe you should just go. Just for tonight." "Go?" I gasped, clutching my throbbing hip. "She just hit me. Dad, she is stealing from us." "Whose side are you on? David?" Rebecca bellowed, turning to him. "It is her or me. Right now. Choose." David flinched. He looked at the floor. "Claire, please, you are upsetting her. Just leave. Let everyone calm down." The betrayal hit me harder than the slap. He wasn't just passive. He was complicit. He was choosing his comfort over my safety. He was choosing the lie over the truth. Rebecca saw his surrender and seized her victory. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and dragged me toward the front door. I tried to pull away, but she was fueled by a manic strength. She wrenched the front door open. The cold winter air rushed in, biting at my heated skin. "Get out!" she shrieked, giving me one final, violent shove. I stumbled across the threshold. Tripping over the welcome mat, I flailed, trying to catch myself, and landed hard on my hands and knees on the freezing concrete of the porch. The impact jarred my bones. "And do not come back," Rebecca yelled. She grabbed the duffel bag I had left near the door earlier that evening, my gym bag, which contained my laptop and a change of clothes, and hurled it at me. It hit my shoulder and tumbled down the stairs. "Rebecca, wait," I started, struggling to stand up. "You are dead to us," she screamed. She grabbed the door handle. I looked up, and for a split second, I saw my father standing in the hallway behind her. He was watching. He was just watching. Slam! The sound echoed through the neighborhood like a gunshot. Then came the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. Click, clack. Then the porch light flicked off. I was left in the darkness. I stood there for a moment, stunned, gasping for air. My cheek burned. My hip throbbed. My hands were scraped and bleeding from the concrete. I walked up to the door and pounded on it once, a weak, hollow sound. "Dad?" I called out. "Dad, please, it is 30 degrees out here. I have nowhere to go." Silence. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I could hear movement inside. I heard voices, muffled, arguing, then quieting down. Then I saw the lights in the living room go out. They were closing the blinds. They were shutting down the house for the night. They were going to sleep, in my bed, with my money, while I stood outside. I walked down the steps, my legs shaking so bad I almost fell again. I picked up my bag. I checked my pockets. I had my phone. I had my wallet. But I knew what was in that wallet. $42. I walked to the edge of the driveway and looked back at the house. It looked so normal. It looked like the kind of house where a happy family lived. Nobody driving by would know that a crime had just been committed inside. Nobody would know that a father had just sacrificed his child to keep his wife happy. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Rebecca. "If you try to break in, I have the gun loaded. Do not test me." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over again until they blurred. A gun. The gun Dad kept in the safe. She had it out. I felt a strange sensation then. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a cold, heavy realization. The bridge wasn't just burned. It was nuked. There was no going back. There was no misunderstanding to clear up. I turned away from the house and began to walk. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from that door. From that lie. From the man who had stood there and done nothing. I walked until my toes went numb. I walked until the tears on my face turned cold and sticky. I walked until I collapsed on the curb. utterly defeated, staring at the empty street. And then I saw the headlights. 2 beams of light cutting through the darkness. The black car. It slowed down, it stopped. And for the first time that night, the terror of being alone was replaced by something else. Curiosity, because whoever was in that car had seen me. They had seen the girl on the curb, and unlike my father, they had stopped. The only thing separating me from the freezing pavement that first night was the rusted floorboards of a 20-year-old Honda Civic. I had bought it for $2,000 cash after selling my Camry, a humiliating downgrade I had made to maximize my savings per Rebecca's advice. I had not mentioned it to anyone because I was ashamed of it. Now, it was my lifeboat. I parked in the back corner of a 24-hour Walmart lot, wedged between a dumpster and a semi-truck. I did not turn the engine on because I was terrified of wasting gas. I had a quarter tank left. I wrapped myself in the spare blanket I kept in the trunk and curled up in the driver's seat, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate my bruised hip. Sleep was impossible. Every shadow that passed the window looked like a police officer coming to tell me to move, or worse, someone coming to break in. I spent that first night staring at the dashboard clock, watching the minutes bleed into hours, 3:30, 4:15, 5. When the sun finally rose, turning the sky a bruised purple, I felt like I had aged 10 years. My reflection in the rearview mirror was a stranger. My hair was matted, my eyes were red-rimmed, and the mark on my cheek had darkened to an ugly purple-yellow bruise. I drove to a Starbucks, not to buy coffee. I could not afford $5 for a latte, but to use the bathroom. I washed my face with freezing water and paper towels that disintegrated on my skin. I applied 3 layers of concealer to my cheek, wincing as I dabbed the tender flesh. I changed into the spare blouse from my gym bag, sprayed myself with deodorant, and drove to work. Northbridge Creative Studio was a temple of aesthetics. Everything was white, glass, and polished concrete. Walking in there feeling like I was covered in a film of street grime was a surreal form of torture. "Hey, Claire, you look tired," my junior copywriter, Jason, said as I walked past his desk. "Insomnia," I lied, keeping my bruised side turned away from him. "Bad night." I tried to work, I really did, but staring at content calendars for a luxury skincare brand felt obscene when I was calculating if I could afford a sandwich for lunch. My stomach growled loudly in the quiet office. I drank water until I felt sick. During my lunch break, I called every shelter in Seattle. "I am sorry, we are full," the first woman said. "We have a wait list for single women." The second said, "Do you have children? We prioritize mothers with children." The third told me. I hung up the phone in the stairwell. Leaning my forehead against the cold concrete wall, I made too much money to qualify for emergency aid, but I had zero access to that money. I was in a gray zone, the working homeless. By the third night, the isolation was breaking me. It was not just the cold, it was the silence. I was sitting in my car, parked on a dark residential street this time, because the security guard at Walmart had flashed his light at me the night before. My breath was fogging up the windows. I pulled out my phone. I needed to scream, but I couldn't. So I did what I did for a living. I created content. I opened TikTok. I did not fix my hair. I did not use a filter. I just hit record. "I am 29 years old," I whispered into the camera, the street lamp casting harsh shadows on my face. "I have a full-time job. I have a college degree. And I'm sleeping in my car tonight because my stepmother beat me and threw me out, and my father watched her do it. I paid their mortgage for 6 months, and they stole my savings. I wanted someone to know I exist." I posted it without captions, without hashtags, just a raw 60-second confession. I turned off the phone and cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, the world had shifted. My phone was buzzing so hard it was vibrating off the dashboard. I picked it up. The video had 40,000 views, 500 comments. "Oh my God. Honey, are you okay? This happened to me too. Narcissistic parents are the devil. Do you have a Venmo?" Let us help. You need to call the police. For a moment, I felt a rush of warmth. I wasn't invisible. People saw me. People believed me. But then, the other notification came, a Facebook tag. Rebecca had found it, or someone had sent it to her. She had posted a long status update. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. "It breaks my heart to air private family matters," she wrote, "but we are being harassed because of lies spread by a troubled family member. Claire has struggled with mental health issues since she was a teenager. We have tried to get her help. We tried to give her structure, but her violent outbursts and delusions became unsafe for us. We did not throw her out. We asked her to leave after she attacked me in my own kitchen. We pray she gets the help she needs." Below it, my father had commented, "We love you. Claire, please come home and let us take you to the doctor." Lily had added, "It is so scary when she gets like this. Stay safe, Mom." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. They were spinning it. They were using my distress as proof of my instability. Then came the flying monkeys. My Aunt Karen, Rebecca's sister, commented on my TikTok video, "Stop lying for attention. You stole money from your parents when you were in college, and you are doing it again. Get a job." The tide in the comments section began to turn. Wait, is this true? Did she attack her mom? There are always two sides to a story. She does look kind of unhinged in this video. The validation I had felt 5 minutes ago evaporated, replaced by a suffocating panic. They were destroying my credibility. If I fought back, I looked crazy. If I stayed silent, I looked guilty. The final blow came the next morning at work. I was called into the CEO's office at 10 o'clock. The HR director was there, looking uncomfortable. "Claire," the CEO said, folding his hands on his glass desk, "we have received some concerning emails, anonymous, but detailed, creating a hostile work environment, instability." "It is a personal matter," I stammered. "My stepmother is trying to—" "We also saw the video," the HR director said gently. "Claire, you are the face of our content team. We cannot have this kind of public drama associated with our brand. Clients are asking questions." "I am the victim here," I pleaded. "We think you need some time," the CEO said. "We are placing you on administrative leave. Paid, of course, for now. But you need to clear this up. Go get stabilized." They escorted me out. I stood on the sidewalk holding a box with my stapler and a succulent, effectively fired in all but name. Paid leave was great, but payroll took 2 weeks to process. I needed money now. I had $12 left. My gas tank was on empty. The light had been on for 20 miles. I looked at my car. It was my only shelter. But it was also a 2-ton paperweight if I couldn't move it, and I couldn't afford to park it anywhere safe. I drove to a We Buy Junk Cars lot in the industrial district. The man looked at the Honda, looked at me, and offered me $400. "It is worth at least $1,000, I argued, my voice cracking. "Take it or leave it, lady," he said, spitting on the ground. I took it. I walked out of there with $400 in greasy 20s. I checked into a Motel 6 that night. I showered for an hour, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I slept in a bed. It felt like heaven. But $400 burns fast in a city like Seattle. 3 nights. That was all it bought me. 3 nights of safety. And then I was back on the street, this time without the car. I became a ghost. During the day, I sat in the public library. It was warm, and they had free Wi-Fi. I pretended to be working on my laptop, moving around to different floors so the security guards wouldn't notice I had been there for 8 hours. I charged my phone. I drank from the water fountain. At night, it was a different game. I learned that bus stations are dangerous. I learned that 24-hour diners will kick you out if you don't order food every hour. I found a spot behind a landscaping shed in a public park where the wind was blocked. I slept sitting up, clutching my duffel bag to my chest. I was hungry, not the I skipped lunch kind of hungry, but a deep, gnawing hollow in my gut that made my hands shake. I bought a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and ate it with a plastic spoon. That was my meal for 3 days. I watched my former life on Instagram. I saw my colleagues at happy hour. I saw Lily posting selfies from her dorm room. I saw Rebecca posting a picture of a sunset with the caption, "Peace after the storm. Healing." I wanted to die. I genuinely thought about just walking into the sound and letting the water take me. I was tired. I was dirty. I was alone. On the 5th day of being truly homeless, I was sitting on a bench near my old neighborhood. I shouldn't have gone back there, but some gravitational pull dragged me toward the scene of the crime. I was leeching Wi-Fi from a coffee shop across the street. My phone pinged, a direct message on Instagram. It was from a blank account. No profile picture, no followers. Username, Justice Seeker 99. I almost deleted it. I had been getting hate mail all week from Rebecca's friends. But the preview text caught my eye. "I know about the trust fund. I know about the forgery." My heart stopped. I clicked open the message. "Claire, I have been watching what they are doing to you. It makes me sick. I know more than they think I know. I have the documents you need to bury them, but we cannot talk here." I typed back, my fingers trembling. "Who are you?" "A friend of your mother's." The reply came instantly. "You look so much like her. Listen to me carefully. Do not give up. We are going to fix this." "How?" I asked. "Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Go back to the house. Stand right in front of the gate where she threw you out." "I cannot," I typed. "She has a restraining order. She threatened to call the police." "Let her call," the stranger replied. "By the time the police get there, we will be gone. Trust me. You have been alone long enough." "Who will be there?" "A black car." The message said, "I will be driving. Just get in. And Claire? Wear something warm." I stared at the screen. It was crazy. It sounded like the opening of a kidnapping movie. But what did I have to lose? I had no home. I had no job. I had no family. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of suspended animation. I used the last of my change to wash my clothes at a laundromat so I wouldn't smell. I brushed my hair in a gas station mirror. At 8:30 the next night, I started walking. I walked up the familiar hill to my father's house. The streetlights buzzed overhead. The wind was biting, carrying the smell of coming snow. I reached the house at 8:55. It looked exactly the same. The porch light was on. I could see the blue flicker of the television in the living room. They were in there, warm, fed, safe. I stood on the sidewalk, right where Rebecca had thrown my bag. I felt the phantom pain in my cheek. I felt the crushing weight of the injustice. I checked my phone. 9 o'clock exactly. I looked down the street. It was empty. My heart sank. It was a prank. It was Rebecca messing with me. Of course it was. I turned to leave, tears hot in my eyes. And then I heard it, the low, expensive purr of an engine. I turned back. A sleek black sedan turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. It moved slowly, purposefully. It pulled up to the curb right in front of me and stopped. The window rolled down. Claire Elise Mitchell? And just like that, the nightmare ended, and the war began. The interior of the car smelled like expensive leather and vanilla, a sharp, clean scent that made my dirty clothes and unwashed hair feel even more conspicuous. I sank into the passenger seat, the heated cushions seeping warmth into my frozen spine. As the door sealed shut, the howling wind outside was instantly silenced, replaced by the soft hum of the climate control. I looked at the woman behind the wheel, up close, under the glow of the dashboard lights. She looked both familiar and terrifyingly severe. She had steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a silk blouse under a structured wool coat. Her hands on the steering wheel were veined but steady, adorned with a simple gold band. "Buckle up, Claire," she said, putting the car into gear. "We have a lot of ground to cover, and I do not want the police stopping us for a traffic violation before we get to safety." "You said you knew my mother," I said, my voice cracking. I grabbed the seatbelt, my hands shaking so bad it took 2 tries to click it into place. "Who are you?" "I am Marion Lawson," she said, glancing at me with eyes that were dark and unreadable. "I am an estate attorney, And 20 years ago, I was your mother's best friend. We went to law school together. My mother had been an artist. I had never known she had friends who were lawyers. But then again, there was a lot I did not know. The version of my mother I held in my head was a soft, watercolor memory, fading with time. If you were her friend, I asked, a spark of anger cutting through my exhaustion, where have you been? Where were you when she died? Where were you for the last 18 years? Marion tightened her grip on the wheel, her jaw set hard. I was right here, Claire, trying to reach you, and every time I called, your father or that woman he married told me you were busy. You were at camp. You were studying. You did not want to speak to me. And eventually, they told me to stop harassing the family or they would file a restraining order. I never got a single call, I whispered. They never told me. I know that now, Marion said grimly. I suspected it then. But I had no proof. Until I saw your video. You look exactly like her. You know, the eyes, the chin. When I saw you sitting in that car, talking about being homeless, it broke the last bit of professional restraint I had. She reached into the back seat without looking and pulled over a thick, leather-bound accordion folder. She dropped it into my lap. It was heavy. Open it. I undid the clasp. Inside were stacks of yellowing papers. Legal documents with stamps dating back 2 decades. On top was a document titled Last Will and Testament of Elise J. Mitchell. Your mother did not just die leaving nothing. Claire, Marion said, her voice hard. She came from money, not millions, but enough. She owned the house your father is living in. She bought it before they were married, and she had a life insurance policy and a portfolio. I stared at the document. My mother's signature was at the bottom, shaky but distinct. Read the clause on page 4, Marion instructed. I flipped the pages. The paper brittle under my fingertips. I found the section. To be held in trust for my daughter, Claire Elise Mitchell, until her 25th birthday, at which time the deed to the property located at 442 Oak Street and the remaining principal of the trust shall be transferred to her sole ownership. I stopped breathing. The house, I stammered. The house is mine? Half the house was supposed to be yours immediately upon her death. Held in trust, Marion corrected. The other half was your father's life estate, but the full ownership was supposed to transfer to you when you turned 25. That was 4 years ago. But Dad said the house was in his name. He said the mortgage was underwater. There was no mortgage when your mother died, Marion said, merging onto the highway, heading toward the downtown skyline. The house was paid off. If there is debt on it now, it is because they took it out against the equity that belonged to you. My head was spinning. The betrayal was not just recent. It wasn't just the $9,000 from my savings. It was my entire life. How? I asked, looking at her. How did they do this? After the funeral, your father was a mess, Marion explained, her tone turning venomous. And then Rebecca showed up. She was working at the furniture store where he went to buy a new recliner. She saw a grieving widower with a paid-off house and a young daughter. She moved fast. Within 6 months, they were married, and then they hired a new lawyer, a man named Peterson, who has since been disbarred for ethics violations. They filed an amendment to the probate. They claimed the original will, the one in your lap, was lost. They produced an older draft that left everything to your father. And you knew? I had the copy, Marion said. I tried to contest it, but I was not family. I was just a friend. And your father? He stood up in court and swore on a Bible that your mother wanted him to have full control to take care of the family. The judge believed the grieving husband over the angry friend. I was shut out. I looked down at the papers. I felt sick, physically violent sick. All those years I had felt like a guest in that house. All those years I had walked on eggshells, cleaned the floors, apologized for my existence. I was not the guest. I was the landlord. And they were the squatters who had been robbing me blind. Why now, I asked. Why pick me up tonight? Because the statute of limitations on fraud is tricky, Marion said as we took the exit for downtown Seattle. "But there is a discovery rule. The clock starts ticking when the victim discovers the fraud. Tonight, Claire, you discovered it, and I am not going to let them get away with it for one more day." We pulled into the underground garage of a sleek, high-rise building. Marion swiped a keycard, and the gate lifted. She parked in a reserved spot next to a Mercedes. "Come," she said. "Leave the rest. Bring the folder." She led me to a private elevator that opened directly into a penthouse apartment. It was not her home. I realized it was too sterile. It looked like a corporate suite. Beige furniture, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-slicked city. "This is the firm's emergency housing," Marion said, tossing her keys on the counter. "It is usually for corporate whistleblowers or high-profile divorce clients hiding from the press. It is yours for as long as we need." She walked to the kitchenette and opened the fridge. It was stocked with water, wine, and pre-made salads. "There are clean towels in the bathroom," she said, pointing down the hall. "There is a robe in the closet. There is a toothbrush on the vanity. Go, wash that house off you. We work tomorrow." I stood in the shower for 45 minutes. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I watched the gray water swirl down the drain, carrying away the grime of the Walmart parking lot, the grease of the cheap motel, and the metaphorical filth of my father's lies. When I came out, wrapped in a plush white robe that cost more than my car, Marion was gone. On the counter was a note and a steaming container of Thai takeout. "Eat, sleep, lock the door. I will be back at 8. I ate the pad thai standing up in the kitchen, crying silently. I slept in a king-sized bed with sheets that felt like silk. For the first time in a week, I did not sleep with one eye open. The next morning, Marion returned at 8 sharp, followed by a young man carrying a laptop and a portable scanner. He looked to be about 25, wearing a hoodie under a blazer, with the frantic energy of a junior associate. "This is Leo," Marion said, pouring herself coffee. "He is our digital forensics specialist. Leo, this is the client." "Hi," Leo said, setting up his station on the dining table. "I have been tracking your socials since Marion flagged the case. It is a lot. They are really going after you." "Show her," Marion said. Leo turned his laptop around. He had created a timeline. It showed my TikTok video, and then the avalanche of coordinated attacks that followed. "Here is the initial post by Rebecca." Leo pointed to the screen. "But look at the comments. These accounts attacking you? Patriot Mom 55, Seattle Lover 12? I traced the IP addresses. They are all coming from the same router." "The house," I whispered. "Exactly," Leo said. "Rebecca, or maybe Lily, created fake accounts to swarm your comment section. That is not just being mean, that is targeted harassment and defamation. And this email sent to your CEO?" He pulled up a document. It was sent from a Proton Mail account, encrypted, but they made a mistake. They attached a PDF that had metadata. The author of the document is listed as Rebecca Sterling. "She got me fired," I said, the rage burning hot in my chest. "Suspended," Marion corrected. "And once we show this to your HR department, you will likely be reinstated with an apology, but that is small potatoes compared to the rest." Marion sat down across from me. She pushed a thick document toward me. It was a retainer agreement. "We have 2 paths. Claire," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, strategic register, "and we are going to take both of them simultaneously." She held up one finger. "Path 1 is the civil suit. We sue for assault, battery, wrongful eviction, and defamation. We use the video of her hitting you. We use the neighbor's testimony. We use the digital trail Leo found. That gets you immediate damages and a restraining order that actually works." She held up a second finger. "Path 2 is the nuclear option. We petition the probate court to reopen your mother's estate based on fraudulent concealment. We present the original will. We prove they hid assets and forged documents. We go after the house. We go after the trust. We go after every penny they stole from you for the last 18 years. If we do that," I said, looking at the contract, It will destroy them. Dad will lose the house. He might go to jail for fraud if they prove he signed those papers knowingly. He stood by and watched you get beaten, Marion said coldly. He watched you sleep on the street. He is not a victim, Claire. He is an accomplice. I looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky. I thought about my father standing in the kitchen, holding his wine glass. Just leave, Claire. I thought about Rebecca's face when she shoved me. You are dead to us. They had already killed the family. They had killed the relationship. They had killed the girl who just wanted to be loved. All that was left was the woman who wanted justice. And your fee? I asked, looking at Marion. I have no money. You know that. Pro bono, Marion said. For now, when we win, and we will win, I will take my standard 30% of the settlement. But honestly, Claire, I would do this for free. I owe it to Elise. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, expensive, and black. One more thing, Leo said, looking up from his screen. If we do this, it is going to get ugly. They will fight dirty. They will try to humiliate you. They already did, I said. They made me homeless. They cannot do anything worse than that. I signed my name on the bottom line, Claire Elise Mitchell. The ink was dark and permanent. Good, Marion said, snapping the folder shut. Leo, start drafting the cease and desist letters. I am going to the courthouse to file the emergency injunction. Claire, you stay here. Do not post anything. Do not answer your phone. Let them think you are still sleeping in your car. Why? I asked. Marion smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth that made me glad she was on my side. Because when we serve them the papers, I want them to be completely blindsided. I want them to be sitting in that stolen house, thinking they won, right up until the moment the hammer drops. She stood up and buttoned her coat. Rest up, Claire. The war starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I sat at the table, watching them work, feeling a strange sensation spreading through my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one reacting. I was the one holding the match, and I was about to burn their entire house of cards to the ground. The next 3 days were a blur of caffeine, printer ink, and the cold, hard satisfaction of gathering ammunition. Marion's temporary apartment transformed from a sanctuary into a war room. Every surface was covered in paper, bank statements, affidavits, and printouts of screenshots. But the real turning point came on Tuesday afternoon. Marion walked through the door, her raincoat dripping, holding a small silver USB drive like it was a holy relic. I called in a favor, she said, tossing her keys on the counter. Mrs. Gable across the street, do you remember her? The lady with the hydrangeas? I asked, looking up from the laptop where I was cataloging Rebecca's nasty Facebook comments. I thought she hated everyone. She hates Rebecca, Marion corrected with a thin smile. Apparently, your stepmother reported her to the Homeowners Association 3 times last year for having her trash bins out too early. Mrs. Gable has a Ring doorbell camera, and it points directly at your father's front porch. My stomach flipped. Does it have audio? Leo, Marion said, handing the drive to the tech specialist. Play it on the big screen. Leo plugged it in. A grainy but high-definition video filled the television. It was night, black and white night vision mode, but the image was clear. I watched myself on the screen. I looked small, vulnerable. I saw the front door fly open. I saw Rebecca lunge. The sound was the worst part. The camera picked up the crisp, sickening crack of her hand connecting with my face. It echoed in the silent apartment. I flinched, physically recoiling as if I were being hit again. Then came the shove, on video. It looked even more violent than I remembered. She threw her whole body weight into it. I flew backward, hitting the porch railing before tumbling down the steps. And then there was David, my father. He stepped into the frame, backlit by the hallway light. He looked at me sprawled on the concrete. He looked at his wife, who was screaming obscenities, and then he slowly, deliberately, reached out and pulled the door shut. The screen went black. The room was silent. I felt tears pricking my eyes. Not from sadness, but from validation. It wasn't in my head. I hadn't exaggerated it. It was assault. "That is battery," Marion said, her voice devoid of emotion. Pure lawyer mode. "That is domestic violence. And that is David acting as an accessory." "Wait, there is more," Leo said. "I did some digging on the neighborhood geotags. Look at this." He pulled up a TikTok video from a user named KevinVlogs206. I recognized him vaguely. A teenager who lived 2 houses down. The timestamp was the same night, 10 minutes later. The video was shaky, filmed from a bedroom window. Kevin's voice whispered in the background. "Yo, the neighbors are screaming again. That lady just kicked the daughter out. Look." The camera zoomed in. It showed me standing on the sidewalk, shivering, clutching my bag. It showed me trying to call someone, then sinking down onto the curb. "She has been out there for 20 minutes, Kevin's voice narrated. "It is like 30 degrees. That is messed up." "This proves you had nowhere to go," Marion said, pointing at the screen. "It proves the immediate danger aspect of the eviction. They cannot claim you left voluntarily to go to a friend's house. This kid is our independent witness." We had the violence. Now we needed the fraud. Later that afternoon, the report came in from the forensic document examiner Marion had hired. He had analyzed the digital copies of the loan documents for the home equity line of credit, the loan Rebecca had taken out against the house to fund her lifestyle. The expert's email was short and brutal. Subject: Analysis of signature for David Mitchell. Conclusion: Highly probable simulation. The signature purporting to be David Mitchell exhibits significant tremor and hesitation marks consistent with forgery. Furthermore, the stylistic loops on the letters D and M match the known handwriting samples of Rebecca Sterling. Not the exemplar samples of David Mitchell. In my professional opinion, the signature was authored by Mrs. Sterling. "She signed his name," I whispered. "She committed bank fraud. And since she used the U.S. mail to send the documents, it is also mail fraud," Marion added, stacking the report on the pile. "She is not just looking at a lawsuit, Claire. She is looking at federal prison." It was time to fire back. "We need to control the narrative," Leo said. "Right now, the local community thinks you are the unstable daughter because of their smear campaign. We need to show them the receipts, but we have to be smart. No emotions. Just facts." We spent 4 hours editing the video. I sat in front of a plain white wall in the apartment. I wore a simple black shirt. I did not wear makeup to cover the bruise, which was now a fading yellow-green. "My name is Claire," I said to the camera, my voice steady. "And I was accused of lying about why I am homeless. I am not here to argue. I am just here to show you the truth." We cut to the doorbell footage. We blurred Rebecca and David's faces to avoid an immediate takedown request, but their voices were crystal clear. The slap, the scream, "You are dead to us." Then we cut to the bank statements, with the account numbers redacted but the transaction descriptions highlighted. Transfer from Claire, $1,500. Payment to Lexus Financial, $800. We ended with the expert's conclusion about the forgery. I posted it at 6 o'clock in the evening. By 8 o'clock, the internet had done what the internet does best. It exploded. The video jumped from TikTok to Twitter to YouTube. But this time, it wasn't just random people commenting. The LawTube community, lawyers and legal analysts who create content, picked it up. I watched a live stream from a popular legal analyst with 2 million followers. He paused my video on the frame of the bank statement. "Okay, guys," the lawyer said to his audience. "If this document is real, this is not just a family spat. This is financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. And that video? That is clear-cut assault. If I were representing the stepmother, I would be telling her to settle immediately and pray she does not get indicted." The tide turned so fast it was dizzying. The comments on Rebecca's Facebook page shifted from support to vitriol. "You hit her? We saw the video. Pay her back her money. Imagine stealing from your stepdaughter to buy a Lexus." Rebecca and David did not handle the pressure well. They panicked. Instead of staying silent, Rebecca went live on Facebook at 10 o'clock that night. It was a disaster. She looked disheveled, holding a glass of wine, her eyes wide and manic. "It is all fake," she screamed at the phone camera. "She used AI. She deep-faked the video. She is mentally ill. We have records. She tried to burn the house down when she was 12. "She is lying," I said to Marion, watching the stream. "I never tried to burn the house down." "It does not matter," Marion said, watching with a satisfied expression. "Look at her. She is unraveling. She is defaming you again. Live on the internet. To thousands of people. Leo, are you recording this?" "In 4K, Leo grinned. David walked into the frame behind Rebecca in the video. He looked haggard. "Becky, stop," he mumbled. "Turn it off." "No," she yelled at him, pushing him away. "They need to know she is a psycho." The stream cut off abruptly, but the damage was done. They looked like villains. I looked like the survivor. The next morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was another reporter or a troll, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Claire?" The voice was trembling, thick with tears. "It is Aunt Nora." I froze. Nora was my father's older sister. She had always been kind to me when I was little, but she had drifted away after he married Rebecca. She came to Christmas dinners, ate quietly, and left early. "Aunt Nora?" "I saw the video," she sobbed. "The one with the doorbell camera. Oh, Claire, I am so sorry." "It is okay, Aunt Nora," I said, wary. "I am safe now." "It is not okay," she cried. I knew she was poison. I was there, Claire. 3 years ago, I was in the kitchen with them. I heard Rebecca telling David that they needed to change the will. She said you were capable of taking care of yourself, and that Lily needed the help more. My grip on the phone tightened. "You heard them discuss the will?" "I heard Rebecca tell him that your mother's trust was a mistake." Nora confessed. She told David that if they did not move the assets into a new trust under her control, the tax implications would ruin them. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. But David, he just nodded. He said, "Whatever you think is best. Becky, just do not make me deal with the lawyers." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I was a coward," Nora whispered. "David is my only brother. I didn't want to lose him. Rebecca told me if I interfered, she would cut me off from the family. But watching that video, watching him close the door on you, I cannot be silent anymore. I am willing to testify. Claire, I will tell the judge everything." I looked at Marion and nodded. This was it, the final nail in the coffin. We had the violence, we had the fraud, and now we had the witness who could prove undue influence and conspiracy. "Thank you, Aunt Nora," I said. "My lawyer will call you in an hour." Marion spent the rest of the day finalizing the complaint. It was a 40-page document, dense with facts, exhibits, and fury. The official filing went into the King County Superior Court system at 4 o'clock on Thursday. Plaintiff: Claire Elise Mitchell. Defendants: Rebecca Sterling, David Mitchell. Causes of action: 1. Assault and battery. 2. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. 3. Wrongful eviction. 4. Conversion, theft of funds. 5. Defamation. 6. Petition to reopen probate regarding the estate of Elise J. Mitchell due to fraudulent concealment. Marion hit submit on the court portal. "It is done," she said, leaning back in her chair. "By tomorrow morning, the process server will hand it to them, and because of the video, the local news is already sniffing around. This is not going to be a quiet family dispute anymore. This is going to be a public reckoning." I looked at the screen, at the case number that now defined my life. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" Marion stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "Now we wait for them to realize that the ungrateful daughter they threw out is the one holding the demolition codes to their entire life." My phone pinged, a notification from Twitter, a journalist from the Seattle Times. "Hi, Claire. I am working on a story about financial abuse in blended families. I saw your video. Would you be willing to comment? I looked at Marion. She nodded. Tell them yes, she said. Tell them everything. I started typing. For years, Rebecca had controlled the story. She had painted the picture of the perfect family and the problem child. But stories are only powerful as long as the audience believes them. And the audience was starting to see the cracks in the paint. I was not just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for my name. I was fighting for the memory of the mother they had erased. And I was fighting for the girl who sat on that curb, freezing and alone, believing she was worthless. That girl was gone. The woman who replaced her was ready for court. The King County Superior Court smelled like floor wax, old paper, and stale anxiety. It was a smell I would never forget. As I walked down the marble hallway flanked by Marion and her team of associates, I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit I had bought at a thrift store 2 days ago because my own clothes were still locked inside the house or ruined from my week on the streets. I wore no makeup to hide the fading yellow bruise on my cheekbone. I wanted the judge to see it. I wanted the world to see it. The courtroom was packed. The local press had seized on the story after my video went viral, framing it as a Cinderella story gone wrong or a commentary on the housing crisis. But for me, it was not a story. It was an autopsy of my life. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. To my right, the defense table was a flurry of activity. Rebecca was there, wearing a cream-colored cashmere suit that probably cost more than my college tuition. She looked impeccable, but her hands were trembling as she poured water from a plastic pitcher. David sat next to her, looking gray and shrunken. He refused to look in my direction. Judge Harrison, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, banged the gavel. We are on the record. Case number 4492, Mitchell versus Mitchell and Sterling. Rebecca's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Henderson with a reputation for aggressive litigation, stood up for his opening statement. He buttoned his jacket with a confident smirk. Your Honor, Henderson began, his voice booming, this case is not about abuse. It is about a family dispute that has been blown out of proportion by a young woman who is financially desperate and emotionally unstable. Claire Mitchell is 29 years old. She is not a child. She was asked to leave the family home because of her erratic behavior. Now, she is using the court system to extort money from her father and stepmother, playing the victim for internet fame. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Marion placed a hand over mine, her skin cool and dry. Let him talk, she whispered. He is digging a hole. Henderson continued, painting a picture of me as a parasite. He claimed I had mooched off my parents for 6 months, that I refused to work, and that the assault was a fabrication, a light tap on the shoulder that I had exaggerated. Then it was our turn. Marion stood up. She did not pace. She did not shout. She simply walked to the podium and placed a flash drive on the evidence table. Your Honor, Marion said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Mr. Henderson tells a compelling story, but we prefer to rely on evidence, and the evidence shows that on the night of November 12th, the defendants did not ask Claire to leave. They beat her, they robbed her, and they left her to freeze. The first hour was a bloodbath of technicalities, but the energy shifted when Marion called Rebecca to the stand. Rebecca walked up to the witness box with her chin held high. She swore to tell the truth, but I knew she wouldn't. She couldn't help herself. Mrs. Sterling, Marion asked, pacing slowly in front of the box. On the night in question, did you strike the plaintiff? I certainly did not, Rebecca sniffed, adjusting her silk scarf. We were having a heated discussion. Claire was screaming at her father. She was out of control. I stepped in to protect my husband. I may have guided her toward the door, but I never hit her. Guided her, Marion repeated. Like an usher at a theater? Yes, Rebecca said. I gently pushed her out because she was becoming violent. And you never intended for her to be homeless? You knew she had nowhere to go? I assumed she would go to a friend's house, Rebecca said smoothly. She is an adult. It is not my job to track her movements. Marion nodded. She walked back to her table and picked up a remote control. "I would like to enter Exhibit A into evidence," Marion said. "Video footage from the doorbell camera across the street, provided by Mrs. Gable." Rebecca's face went pale. She evidently did not know about the neighbor's camera. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom went silent. On the screen, the grainy night vision footage played. We saw the door fly open. We heard the screaming. And then, everyone in the room watched Rebecca Sterling wind up and slap me across the face with enough force to snap my head back. They watched her shove me with both hands, sending me flying off the porch. They watched her throw my bag down the stairs after me. "You are dead to us," the voice on the recording shrieked. "Get out." Marion paused the video right at the moment of impact. The image of Rebecca's contorted, rage-filled face was frozen on the screen, 10 feet tall. "Mrs. Sterling," Marion said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Does that look like guiding to you?" Rebecca stammered. It looks worse than it was. The camera angle is misleading." "Is it?" Marion pressed. "Let us look at the text message you sent Claire 20 minutes later. Exhibit B." Marion projected the screenshot. "Rebecca, if you try to break in, I have the gun loaded. Do not test me." "You testified 5 minutes ago that you thought she went to a friend's house," Marion said. "But here you are, threatening to shoot her if she tries to come back inside to get her coat. Which is it, Mrs. Sterling? Was she safe with a friend? Or was she freezing on your porch while you loaded a firearm?" Rebecca looked at the jury, then at the judge, her composure cracking. "I felt threatened. She is bigger than me." "She was on the sidewalk," Marion snapped. "You were behind a locked door with a gun." "Mr. Henderson objected, but the damage was done. The judge was staring at Rebecca with open disdain. Marion was not finished. She moved to the finances. "Let us talk about the money," Marion said. "You claimed in your deposition that the $1,500 Claire sent you monthly was for household expenses. Is that correct?" "Yes," Rebecca said, regaining some confidence. "Groceries, utilities, it adds up." "I have here a forensic accounting of your personal checking account," Marion said, holding up a stack of papers. "On October 1st, Claire transferred $1,500. On October 2nd, you made a payment of exactly $800 to Lexus Financial Services for a lease on a 2024 convertible, and another payment of $400 to Nordstrom. I manage the household funds as a pool," Rebecca said defensively. "Money is fungible." "And the signature on the refinancing documents for the house?" Marion asked. "The loan you took out in David Mitchell's name?" Marion projected the document. Next to it, she projected the report from the handwriting expert. "This expert concludes that David Mitchell did not sign this loan," Marion said. "He concludes that you did. Did you forge your husband's signature to mortgage the house that belonged to Claire's mother?" "David gave me permission," Rebecca yelled, standing up. "He hates paperwork. I sign everything for him." "We will ask him that in a moment," Marion said coolly. "No further questions." When David took the stand, he looked like a man walking to the gallows. He kept glancing at Rebecca, who was glaring at him with intense, silent fury. "Mr. Mitchell?" Marion asked softly. "Did you know that Claire was transferring money to a savings account she thought was for her future home?" David wiped sweat from his forehead. I knew she was contributing." Rebecca handled the details. "Did you know she was told it was a savings trust?" I think so, yes." "And did you know that money was being used to pay for a vacation to Cabo San Lucas for you, your wife, and your stepdaughter, but not Claire?" David looked down at his hands. "Rebecca said we needed a break." "Exhibit C," Marion announced. "Internal emails between David Mitchell and the bank manager." The screen changed. It showed an email from David's work account. "David, please hold off on the foreclosure notice. My daughter is moving back in next month. She will be paying rent. That should cover the shortfall on the interest payments." The courtroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. "You knew," Marion said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "You did not just let it happen. David, you planned it. You invited your daughter home not to help her, but to harvest her income to pay for debts you and Rebecca created. I was trying to save the house, David cried out, his voice cracking. It is all I have left. It was not yours to save, Marion said. It belonged to the estate of Elise Mitchell, which brings us to our final witness. We call Nora Mitchell to the stand. My aunt walked in. She looked terrified. She avoided David's eyes as she sat down. Nora, Marion asked, you are David's sister. You have been in their home many times. Did you ever hear Rebecca discuss Claire's inheritance? Nora took a shaky breath. She leaned into the microphone. Yes, Thanksgiving. 3 years ago, I was in the kitchen helping with the dishes. Rebecca and David were arguing about the will. What did Rebecca say? She said, Nora paused, wiping a tear. She said that Claire was a threat to their new life. She told David, if we do not get that house out of the trust, that girl is going to take everything when you die. We need to fix it so Lily is protected. She called Claire. She called her a mistake. I looked at David. He had his face buried in his hands. He was shaking. And what did David say? Marion asked. He said, do whatever you have to do, Becky. Just keep the peace. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a truth so ugly it could not be denied. My father hadn't just been passive. He had traded my birthright for a quiet life with a woman who hated me. Mr. Henderson tried to salvage it on cross-examination. Mrs. Mitchell, family arguments are common. Are you saying you never said things you regretted in the heat of the moment? This was not heat of the moment, Nora said, her voice firming up. This was a plan, a cold, calculated plan to erase my niece from this family. Rebecca's lawyer sat down, defeated. But Rebecca was not done. She whispered furiously to her lawyer, pointing at her phone. Henderson sighed and stood up again. Your Honor, Henderson said, we would like to introduce the concept that Claire Mitchell has a history of mental instability, which contextualizes the parents' actions. We have social media posts. Objection, Marion cut in. Relevance, and also opens the door to character evidence. Overruled, the judge said. I want to hear this. Henderson tried to paint me as manic, citing my TikTok video as proof of a breakdown. Marion stood up for the rebuttal. She looked like a predator who had just been served a steak. If we are talking about social media, Marion said, let us look at the defendant's online behavior. Leo, working the laptop, pulled up the dossier. Exhibit F, Marion said, a series of Facebook posts and comments made by Rebecca Sterling over the last week. The screen filled with Rebecca's venom. Claire is a parasite. She has always been mentally ill. She stole money from us for drugs. I should have slapped her harder. That last one hung on the screen. It was a comment Rebecca had made on a friend's private page. Thinking it was hidden, Leo had found it. I should have slapped her harder. Marion read aloud. That does not sound like a concerned mother dealing with an unstable child. Mr. Henderson, that sounds like an abuser bragging about her crime. The judge looked at Rebecca. Rebecca shrank back in her seat, realizing too late that the internet is forever. Finally, it was my turn to speak, not as a witness answering questions, but the plaintiff's final statement. I stood up. My legs felt steady. Your Honor, I said, looking directly at the judge. The defense wants you to believe this is just a family fight. They want you to believe I am here because I am greedy or vindictive. I turned to look at David. He slowly lowered his hands and looked at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. He looked like a stranger. I am not here for the money, I said, my voice ringing clear in the room. I am here because the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones who hurt me the most. I am here because my father stood in a hallway and watched his wife beat me, and then he locked the door. I took a breath. I was homeless for 5 days. I slept in a car. I washed my face in a gas station sink, and while I was doing that, they were planning a vacation with my savings. That is not a misunderstanding. That is cruelty. I am asking the court not just for restitution, but for validation. I am asking you to tell them that I exist, that I matter, and that they cannot erase me anymore." I sat down. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Judge Harrison closed her file. She took off her reading glasses and looked at the defendants. Her expression was one of barely contained disgust. "I have heard enough," the judge said. "I do not need to take this under advisement. The evidence is overwhelming." She looked at Rebecca. "Mrs. Sterling, your conduct is reprehensible. The video evidence alone is sufficient for the assault charge. But the financial evidence? It is damning." She turned to David. "And Mr. Mitchell, you failed in your most basic duty as a father. You allowed your daughter to be robbed and abused to maintain your own comfort. It is cowardly." The gavel was raised. "I am ready to issue my ruling." I looked at Marion. She squeezed my hand. I looked at the black car keys sitting on the table, the keys that had saved me, and I knew, no matter what number the judge read out, I had already won. I had spoken the truth, and the world had listened. Judge Harrison's voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a falling guillotine. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with whispers just moments before, was now so silent that I could hear the scratching of the stenographer's machine. "In the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell and Sterling," the judge began, looking over her reading glasses at the defense table, "the court finds the testimony of the plaintiff, supported by video evidence and forensic analysis, to be credible and compelling. The defense, conversely, has offered little more than contradictions and, quite frankly, perjury." I held my breath. Marion's hand was still on top of mine, warm and steady. "Regarding the count of battery," the judge continued, "the video evidence is indisputable. Judgment for the plaintiff. Regarding the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress and wrongful eviction, the court finds for the plaintiff, to forcibly eject a resident without notice into freezing conditions is unconscionable. To do so to one's own child is a moral failing that the law must address." Rebecca let out a small, strangled gasp. David was staring at the table, his posture slumped like a puppet with cut strings. "Furthermore," Judge Harrison said, her voice hardening, "regarding the petition to reopen probate, the evidence of signature forgery on the refinancing documents is overwhelming. This court finds that the defendants engaged in a systematic concealment of assets belonging to the estate of Elise Mitchell. The equity in the property was not Mr. Mitchell's to leverage." She shuffled her papers and then delivered the blow that would shatter their world. "The court orders the following. First, a permanent restraining order is granted. Rebecca Sterling is to have no contact with Claire Mitchell and must remain at least 500 feet away from her at all times. Second, regarding damages, for pain and suffering, medical expenses, and the restitution of stolen funds, the court awards the plaintiff the sum of $75,000. I heard Rebecca whimper. They didn't have $75,000. I knew that. They were broke. That was why they had stolen from me in the first place. "And finally," the judge said, looking directly at my father, "to satisfy the claim regarding the mishandled trust and the fraudulent mortgage, the court is ordering a constructive trust over the property located at 442 Oak Street." She paused for effect. "Ownership of the home is hereby transferred to Claire Elise Mitchell, effective immediately. The defendants, David Mitchell and Rebecca Sterling, are ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days. Alternatively, they may purchase the plaintiff's interest at fair market value, which is estimated at $1.2 million. It was a death sentence for their lifestyle. They could not buy me out. They could barely pay the electric bill. Any outstanding loans taken out against the property by means of forgery are the sole personal liability of Rebecca Sterling and David Mitchell, the judge added, driving the final nail in. The house will transfer to Ms. Mitchell free and clear of those fraudulent encumbrances. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. Crack! It sounded just like the slap Rebecca had given me. But this time, it didn't hurt. It healed. "No!" Rebecca screamed, leaping to her feet. "You cannot take my house. I put everything into that house. David, do something!" David stood up slowly. He looked at the judge. Then he turned and looked at me. For a second, I thought he might come over. I thought he might apologize. But then he looked at Rebecca, who was clutching his arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket, weeping about injustice. David started, his voice cracking. Claire, please. Come on, David, Rebecca hissed, pulling him toward the exit, away from the cameras that were already flashing. She is a monster. She tricked them. She ruined us because she is jealous. She is my daughter, David whispered, but he let himself be pulled away. He chose the path of least resistance, just as he always had. I watched them go, the woman who had tormented me and the man who had let her. They looked small. They looked pathetic, and for the first time in 18 years, I did not feel afraid of them. Marion squeezed my hand. It is over. Claire, you won. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 10 years old. I won, I repeated. We walked out of the courthouse into a wall of camera flashes. The story had gone national. Homeless daughter wins against wicked stepmother. It was clickbait gold. But the reporters shouting questions weren't asking about the scandal anymore. Claire, how does it feel to get justice? Claire, what will you do with the house? Ms. Lawson, is this a precedent for financial abuse cases? I stopped at the bottom of the steps. I looked at the microphones. I thought about the girl in the car, crying into her phone camera. I just want to say one thing, I said, my voice steady. This was not about a house. It was about showing people that you do not have to accept abuse just because it comes from family. Being related by blood does not give someone the right to destroy you. And if you are out there, and you are scared, and you are being told you are crazy, you are not alone. Fight back. I walked through the crowd, got into Marion's car, and for the first time in a week, I did not look back. The next 7 days were a strange limbo. I was reinstated at Northbridge Creative Studio with a profusely apologetic email from the CEO and a raise, but I took the week off to process everything. I stayed in Marion's corporate apartment, sleeping, eating, and reading the thousands of messages flooding my inbox. Most were supportive. Many were heartbreaking stories from other people who had been financially abused by parents. I realized I had tapped into a vein of silent suffering that ran deep in this country. Then, exactly 1 week after the verdict, Marion called me. Are you ready? She asked. For what? To take possession, she said. The sheriff served the eviction notice 3 days ago. They are out. The keys are waiting. My stomach did a somersault. I do not know if I can go back there. Marion? You have to, she said firmly. Not to live there, but to claim it, to close the circle. I will pick you up in 20 minutes. When the black car pulled up to the curb of the apartment building, I felt a sense of déjà vu. It was the same car that had saved me that freezing night, but this time it was daylight. The sun was shining on the wet streets of Seattle, making the pavement sparkle. I got in. Marion was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking like a movie star. You look better, she noted, glancing at me. The bruise is gone. Makeup helps, I said. But yeah, I feel lighter. We drove in silence for a while, heading toward Queen Anne. As we got closer to the neighborhood, my heart started to race. Every street corner held a memory. There was the park where I learned to ride a bike. There was the school where I got bullied for wearing hand-me-downs. Claire, Marion said, breaking the silence as we stopped at a red light. I have a confession to make. You have another secret? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I think I have had enough plot twists for one lifetime. Marion chuckled. This is a good one. You know I am a lawyer, but that is my day job. I also sit on the board of a foundation, the Phoenix Initiative. I have heard of it, I said. They fund documentaries, right? Social justice projects. We do more than that, Marion said. We build campaigns. We find stories that need to be told, and we amplify them to change laws. We have been looking for a new director of content for 6 months. We needed someone who understands storytelling, someone who understands digital media, and someone who understands the stakes. She turned to look at me. The light turned green, but she didn't move. I showed the board your video, she said, the one you made in the car, and the one you made for the rebuttal. They were blown away, Claire, not just by the raw emotion, but by the structure, the clarity. You have a gift. What are you saying? I am offering you a job, Marion said. Director of Storytelling for the Phoenix Initiative. We are launching a national campaign on financial abuse and housing insecurity. We want you to lead it. I stared at her. Me? But I am just a copywriter. You are not just a copywriter, Marion corrected. You are a survivor who took down a fraudulent estate scheme with a TikTok video and a doorbell camera. You understand the modern battlefield. We want you to help other victims tell their stories, to build a platform where people like you can find legal resources, housing support, and community. And the salary? She added, smiling. It is 30% more than what Northbridge is paying you, plus full benefits, and you would report directly to me. I felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't the money, it was the mission. For the last 10 years, I had been telling stories to sell moisturizer and tech gadgets. I had been using my voice to make other people rich. The idea of using it to help people who were shivering in cars, people who were being gaslit by their families. It felt like destiny. I swallowed hard. I do not know what to say. Say yes, Marion said, accelerating through the intersection. Because the world does not need more moisturizer ads. It needs more truth. Yes, I whispered. Then louder. Yes, I will do it. Marion smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed her sharp face. Good, because we have a lot of work to do. But first, we have a house to inspect. We turned onto my street. My heart hammered against my ribs. The house loomed ahead. It looked different. The blinds were drawn. The driveway was empty. Rebecca's Lexus and Dad's SUV were gone. The meticulously manicured lawn looked a little wilder, littered with dead leaves. Marion pulled the black car up to the curb, the exact same spot where she had found me. Ready? She asked. I took a deep breath. Ready? We got out. The wind was cold, but I was wearing a thick wool coat that I had bought with my own money. I wasn't shivering. I walked up the driveway. The gravel crunched under my boots. I walked past the spot where I had sat on the pavement. I walked up the concrete steps where I had been thrown. I reached the front door. The beige paint was chipped near the handle. Marion reached into her pocket and pulled out a key ring. She handed it to me. It is your house, Claire, she said softly. You open it. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted the key. It slid in smoothly. Click, the deadbolt retracted. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like rosemary and garlic anymore. It smelled like bleach and emptiness. We walked inside. The house was gutted. Rebecca had taken everything she could legally take. The furniture was gone. The paintings were gone. The curtains were gone. It was just a shell of wood and plaster. I walked into the living room. The fireplace was cold. I walked into the kitchen. The granite island, the one where I had confronted them, the one where I had been hit, was bare. They stripped it, Marion observed, looking around. Spiteful to the end. It does not matter, I said, running my hand along the wall. They cannot take the walls. They cannot take the view. I walked to the back window. The sun was setting over the Sound, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. It was the same view my mother had loved. I closed my eyes. I could almost hear her humming. I could almost smell her oil paints. Hi, Mom, I whispered into the empty room. I got it back. I felt a peace settle over me, profound and absolute. The ghosts were gone. Rebecca's perfume was gone. David's silence was gone. Sss. So, Marion said, standing in the doorway, what are you going to do with it? It is a big house for one person, and the market is hot. You could sell it and walk away with over $1 million. I looked at the empty space. I thought about the job Marion had just offered me. I thought about the thousands of comments on my video. I have nowhere to go. My parents kicked me out. I am sleeping in my van. An idea began to form in my mind. A crazy, beautiful, poetic idea. No, I said, turning to face Marion. I am not going to sell it. You want to live here? She asked, surprised. After everything? No, I said. I cannot live here. Too many bad memories. But I can make sure no one else has to freeze on a porch like I did. I looked at the spacious living room, the 4 bedrooms upstairs, the finished basement. I want to turn it into a transition house, I said, the words tumbling out as the vision took shape. For women who have been displaced by domestic abuse or family rejection, women who are working but cannot afford first and last month's rent, a safe harbor. Marion's eyes widened. We can run it through the Phoenix Initiative, I continued, pacing the room, my mind firing on all cylinders. We can call it Elise's house. We will give them legal counsel. We will help them save money, real savings, not fake trusts. We will help them rewrite their stories. I stopped and looked at Marion. What do you think? Marion looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. I think, she said, that your mother would have loved that. I looked back out the window at the sunset. The house wasn't a tomb anymore. It was a seed, and I was going to make it grow. Okay, I said, buttoning my coat. Let us go. I have a lot of content to plan. I walked out of the house, locking the door behind me. This time, I was the one holding the keys. I walked down the steps, not as a victim, but as an owner, as a director, as a daughter who had finally grown up enough to save herself. I got into the black car, and as we drove away, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror one last time. It didn't look scary. It looked like a promise. The end of my revenge wasn't seeing them suffer. It was seeing myself thrive. And that was the best story of all. The 30 days granted by the court evaporated like mist. And suddenly, the deadline was here. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and drizzling, the kind of Seattle weather that usually made me want to curl up with a book. But today, I was standing on the wet pavement of the driveway, watching the final act of a tragedy that had spanned 18 years. Marion stood next to me, holding a black umbrella that shielded us both. She did not say a word. She just offered a silent, solid presence, like a lighthouse against a storm. In front of us, a small, battered rental truck was parked crookedly near the porch. It was a stark downgrade from the luxury SUVs and delivery vans that used to frequent this address. The back gate was open, revealing a chaotic jumble of boxes, loose clothes, and the few pieces of furniture Rebecca had been allowed to keep, items that were proven to be hers before the marriage. The front door opened, and Rebecca stepped out. She looked older. The last month had stripped away the glossy veneer she wore like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her makeup was non-existent, and she wore a pair of jeans that looked too loose on her frame. She was carrying a box of kitchen appliances, struggling with the weight. When she saw me, she froze. For a moment, the old fire sparked in her eyes, that reflex of dominance, that instinct to sneer, but it flickered and died almost instantly, suffocated by the reality of her defeat. She set the box down on the wet concrete with a heavy thud. David followed her out a moment later. My father. He was carrying a garment bag. He looked hollowed out, as if the structure of his life had been the only thing holding his spine straight. When he saw me, he stopped. He did not look angry. He looked terrified. And then there was Lily. She was leaning against the side of the truck, scrolling on her phone, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the rain. She looked up, saw me, and immediately looked away, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. It was a mix of anger and humiliation, the look of someone who had enjoyed the spoils of war but could not handle the sight of the battlefield. Rebecca walked toward me. Marion shifted slightly, stepping forward to intercept, but I put a hand on her arm. It is okay. I signaled, I can handle this. Rebecca stopped 5 feet away. She wiped her wet hands on her jeans. Are you happy? She asked. Her voice was thin. trembling with a mixture of rage and self-pity. "You got what you wanted, Claire. You destroyed us. I hope you are proud." I looked at her. I looked for the monster who had terrorized my childhood. I looked for the woman who had shoved me into the cold. But all I saw was a bitter, bankrupt woman who had gambled everything on cruelty and lost. "I did not want this, Rebecca," I said calmly. "Liar," she spat, though the venom lacked its usual potency. "You planned this. You and your fancy lawyer. You waited until we were vulnerable. You threw your own father onto the street. No parent deserves to be treated like this by their child." I felt a surge of the old anger, hot and sharp. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to list every insult, every stolen dollar, every cold Christmas. I wanted to remind her that she was the one who threw me onto the street. But as I looked at David, who was standing by the truck, staring at his shoes, I realized something profound. Screaming would not fix them. Nothing would fix them. They were broken people who had built a life on a foundation of lies, and now they were buried under the rubble. Winning did not mean hurting them back. Winning meant refusing to play their game anymore. "I did not destroy this family," I said, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the sound of the rain. "You did that the moment you decided I was a resource to be used instead of a daughter to be loved. You did that when you chose money over loyalty. I just finally stood up and said, 'Enough.'" Rebecca opened her mouth to argue, to spin another narrative, but the words died in her throat. She looked at the house she had schemed for, the house she had forged signatures for, and then she looked at me. The realization that she had absolutely no power left seemed to crush her. She turned around without another word, picked up her box, and shoved it into the truck. David lingered. He looked at me across the distance. I saw his mouth open slightly. I saw the hesitation in his eyes. I knew what he was thinking. He wanted to say sorry. He wanted to say he loved me. He wanted to bridge the gap. But he was a coward to the end. He looked at Rebecca's back. Then he looked at me one last time, his eyes wet with something that might have been tears or might have been rain. He shook his head slightly, turned, and climbed into the passenger seat of the truck. Lily got in the back. The engine sputtered to life. I watched them drive away. I watched the taillights of the rental truck disappear around the corner, taking 18 years of trauma with them. The street was quiet. "Are you okay?" Marion asked softly. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. "I am ready to go inside." We walked up the steps. I unlocked the door. The house was empty, truly empty. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It felt like a blank canvas. I walked through the living room. I remembered where the Christmas tree used to stand, where I was always relegated to the back of the photo. I walked into the kitchen. I looked at the island where Rebecca had hit me. I touched the cold granite. It was just a rock. It held no power over me. I walked upstairs to my old room, the small guest room they had moved me into. It was bare. Then, I went to the master bedroom. This had been my mother's room. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. I remembered her planting the hydrangeas. I remembered her painting at an easel right in this spot. "It is a beautiful house," Marion said, standing in the doorway. "It is worth a fortune. You could sell it tomorrow and never worry about money again." I turned to look at her. "I cannot sell it. Marion, if I sell it, it just becomes money. And money is what ruined this family. I want it to mean something else." "What do you have in mind?" "I want to give it back," I said. "Not to them, to people like me." I walked over to where Marion stood. "I want to partner with the Phoenix Initiative. I want to turn this house into a sanctuary, a transitional home for women who have been displaced by family abuse, women who have jobs, who are trying, but who just need a safe place to land for 6 months while they save up and fight their legal battles." Marion's eyes widened. A slow smile spread across her face. "You want to run a shelter?" "Not a shelter," I corrected. "A launch pad. We will call it the Elise House. We will offer legal aid. We will offer financial literacy classes, so no one can ever trick them with a fake trust fund again. We will help them reclaim their lives. It will cost a lot to renovate, Marion warned, though I could tell she was already on board. To bring it up to code for multi-resident occupancy. I have the settlement money, I said. And I have the salary from the job you just gave me. And, I smiled. I have a feeling we can raise the rest. People want to help. They just need a story to believe in. Marion laughed. Director of storytelling indeed. All right, Claire, let us do it. The next 4 months were a whirlwind. I didn't just work on the house. I poured my soul into it. We ripped out the carpets that Rebecca had chosen. We painted over the beige walls with warm, vibrant colors, teals and terracottas that my mother would have loved. We turned the dining room into a communal workspace with computers and printers. We turned the basement into a studio apartment for an on-site manager. I documented the whole process on social media. I shared the ugly truth of the demolition and the beauty of the rebuilding. The community that had rallied around me when I was homeless rallied around the house. Donations poured in: furniture, bedding, kitchen supplies. A local contractor donated his labor to fix the roof. A security company installed a top-tier system for free. And then, it was opening day. It was a crisp spring evening. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the freshly painted porch. A small crowd had gathered on the lawn. Donors, volunteers, neighbors, and a few journalists. I stood on the steps, wearing a dress I had bought with my own money, feeling strong and grounded. Marion stood beside me, looking proud. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. 6 months ago, I stood on this exact spot, freezing and alone. I had just been thrown out of this door by the people who were supposed to love me. I thought my life was over. I paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. I saw Mrs. Gable, the neighbor with the doorbell camera, wiping her eyes. I saw Kevin, the teenager who had filmed me, giving me a thumbs up. But in that darkness, I found something unexpected. I continued. I found strangers who cared. I found a lawyer who believed in justice, and I found my own voice. We did not rebuild this house to hide the past. We rebuilt it to change the future. This house is a promise that if you are brave enough to leave a toxic situation, there is a place for you to go. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. You are welcome home. Applause broke out, warm and genuine. I cut the ribbon, a bright orange ribbon, my mother's favorite color. As the crowd began to mingle, entering the house to tour the common rooms, I stepped away to the edge of the driveway to take a breath. The air smelled of blooming jasmine and hope. Movement across the street caught my eye. A man was standing on the opposite sidewalk, half hidden by the shadow of an oak tree. He was wearing a beige windbreaker. His shoulders were slumped. It was David. He was watching the celebration. He was watching the strangers walking into the home he had lost. He was watching his daughter, who was smiling and surrounded by people who respected her. My heart gave a single, painful throb. Part of me, the little girl part, wanted to run across the street. I wanted to drag him inside and show him what I had built. I wanted him to be proud of me. He took a step off the curb, as if he were going to cross. I stood still. I did not wave. I did not frown. I just waited. He hesitated. He looked at the house, bright and full of life. Then he looked at me. He saw the woman I had become, a woman who didn't need him to survive anymore. He stopped. He pulled his collar up against the wind, and then, slowly, he turned around and walked away into the deepening twilight. I watched him go until he was just a speck in the distance. I didn't feel angry. I felt a quiet, final acceptance. He had made his choice years ago, and tonight I had made mine. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Claire? I turned. Marion was standing by the curb. The black car, the sleek, beautiful machine that had started it all, was idling softly. The passenger door was open. But this time, the back door wasn't the one waiting for me. Marion patted the roof of the car and pointed to the front passenger seat. Ready to go? She asked. We have a strategy meeting for the next project at 8. I smiled. I am driving, I joked, though I walked toward the passenger side. Maybe next time, Marion grinned. I paused before getting in. I looked at the small brass plaque we had mounted next to the front door. The Elise House, Est 2024. You are safe here. I touched the cool metal for a second. Goodbye, Mom, I whispered. And thank you. I climbed into the front seat of the black car. I buckled my seatbelt. The leather was warm. The engine hummed with power. As we pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic of the city, I realized the truth about that night 6 months ago. The black car hadn't been magic. It hadn't been a fairy godmother intervention. It was simply the result of one woman deciding that she wouldn't look away when she saw injustice. Marion had stopped for me. And now, I was in the car. I was part of the team. We were going to drive through the city, looking for the other girls shivering on curbs, looking for the other victims locked out of their lives. We were going to pull over. We were going to unlock the doors, and we were going to tell them that the nightmare was over. That was the real revenge, not destroying my father, but saving everyone he and Rebecca had tried to break. I watched the city lights blur past my window, bright and beautiful. I wasn't homeless anymore. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to Claire's story. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I would love to know how far this story has traveled. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button so we can share this message of justice with even more people. Stay strong.